my name is Jill Flynn and I teach vet photography for the Brian Peterson School of Photography. I'm very excited to be able to participate in these weekly critiques. And this first image that I'm going to critique is one of my favorite subjects, dogs. I love photographing dogs. And let's see what information we have about this. This photo was taken by Paula Brady, and she says that Chase is under the gray Montana sky. He didn't know how to sit on command, but we finally got him to sit for a bit. Camera settings were ISO 100, 23mm focal length, 1/80th of a second. I think the photo is lacking the wow factor. I like the composition, but it's lacking in color, brightness, etc. I used a Canon Mark D2. The lens was a 16-35, and I think I should have used a higher shutter speed as well. I think this is a terrific setting for an outdoor portrait, Paula. So you said this was taken in Montana. When I think of Montana, I think of vast, wide open spaces, and this is exactly what you captured here. You've got that big Montana sky and this big Montana. I don't know if this must be like a hay field. I love how you can see the rolled bales of hay in the background. And I also like how you can see the lines in the grass or the hayfield, probably when the tractor was cutting and rolling the bales of hay. That just adds a really nice element to the portrait, an interesting element to the portrait, and also gives a user a sense of place, what was going on. So this is what I would call an environmental storytelling portrait. So really nice job with including the environment and the little elements in it that help to tell your story. So as you discovered, it takes a lot of patience when photographing pets. They don't take direction well, but your patience paid off because you say you finally got Chase to sit for a bit. And but when they do cooperate, and when they give you that magical look or that magical pose, it's all worth the time and effort, as you just proved here. I love how Chase is just sitting there looking right into the camera. That look just draws me right into the portrait. It engages me. It makes me just want to go in and sit right next to him. So really nice job with that connection, and you did a really good job on his eyes. I can see the natural catch light. It's got spark and energy. And also when you're photographing, doing full body portraits of animals sitting, it's really good if you can get them to sit at even just a slight angle, which Chase is doing here, because when they sit at a slight angle, that will allow the viewer to see part of their body, and that just helps to put everything in perspective, as opposed to when you're just photographing them straight on and you don't see that, you don't get to see the body and the lines of their body. So this is a very appealing way to photograph dogs and cats, so keep that in mind. If just getting them to sit at a slight angle really makes a noticeable difference. Now you mentioned that you think you like the composition, but you think the portrait lacks color and brightness and a wow factor. So I don't think it's the color and brightness. I mean, it's a cloudy day. It's this open field. There's actually not a lot of color here. I think what you're speaking of really is the presence of Chase in the frame. So for me, what would give this portrait a stronger impact and a stronger punch would be to have Chase, give him more visual weight in the frame. That will make him stand out, and that will give you a huge wow factor, because you have Chase, this magnificent, beautiful dog, but he's competing with this magnificent Montana landscape, and that's a hard thing to compete with. So you've got that landscape filling a lot of the frame. So what you want to do is you want to give Chase, let Chase take up more of the frame, maybe even like 2/3 of a frame or something. So give him more visual weight in the frame, and then you can still compose and include, all of the background and the bales of hay and that magnificent sky. You can still get all of that in the frame, but that will give you a big wow factor, in my opinion. And the other thing you can do is even maybe try to create a more shallow depth of field. You didn't list your aperture setting, but if you blurred the background a little bit more, that would help isolate Chase in the frame. It will make him stand out more in the frame, and you still will give the viewer a sense of place and space. So even with the background more out of focus, you'll still be able to see the bales of hay and the lines in the field. So that would be a nice element to add a more shallow depth of field. And you ask about shutter speed, that you think 1/80th of a second might have been too slow. What really matters is when you view this portrait as 100%, is your focal point sharp. So when photographing animals, you want to focus on their eyes. So when you view this portrait of Chase, are his eyes sharp and in focus, then you're okay. But basically, I try to use 1/50th or 1/200th of a second at second minimum shutter speed when photographing animals, and sometimes a little bit higher depending on the lens that I'm using. So that's a good shutter speed to strive for, because the last thing you want to do is you have this beautiful portrait and you go to print it and blow it up and you notice that the eyes are out of focus. If you enjoy taking these outdoor portraits of Chase, a good lens for portraits like this would be a wide angle prime, something like a 24. That's like a perfect lens for environmental outdoor portraits. That lens is going to allow you to move in real close to your subject, to the pet, let that pet fill up most of the frame. At the same time, it will allow you to include, the landscape and the background, so you still get the sense of what's going on. So in a portrait like this, you'll still get all the bales of hay and you'll still be able to see all that, but Chase will be much larger in the frame. He'll be close to you, he'll be in focus. And then another thing you do is to give you that wow factor too, is to stoop down. Shoot from your Chase's eye level perspective, or even a lower perspective. So when photographing pets, I'm often lying on the ground, shooting on my side, or even shooting on my stomach. So since he's sitting up, you, at a minimum, would want to be stooping or sitting down. And if you shoot from a slightly lower angle, just kind of envision you'll be able to include more of that sky. It'll kind of open up your composition and open up your frame. So you might want to rent a 24 millimeter prime or a wide angle prime and take it out for a test bin. But I think that will give you that wow factor. And adjust your shooting angle again. When you shoot from your subject's eye level perspective, from the animal's eye level perspective, that will make the portrait more intimate, more personal. So again, sit down, shoot down, and even shoot from a slightly low angle looking up. That will give a lot of impact to a portrait. And another thing you might want to try when you're going to offset the pet in the frame, instead of offsetting them on the left, next time try to offset them on the right. And I'll show you what I mean if we just kind of rotate this. So when you offset the pet to the right, you can use that as a way to guide the viewer's eyes across the frame and to your subject. That also adds movement through the frame and adds flow to your comp. So here you can use the line of the landscape. See how it kind of guides the viewer's eyes right over to Chase. You even got the little bales of hay that kind of guide the viewer's eyes. You can even use negative space. Negative space is a great way to kind of push the viewer's eyes across the frame into your subject. So again, lines are very important in portraits, animal portraits, or any kind of portraits. And it's a great way to add movement and flow and guide the viewer's eyes to your subject. So something to keep in mind. Just a quick recap. So that wow factor to me is more composition as opposed to brightness. So again, vision Chase taking up a larger portion of the frame. Envision a lower angle perspective, eye level perspective. Envision him offset to the other side, so the viewer's eyes naturally will move and gravitate toward him, and that will just open up your comp, but giving him more visual weight in the frame will give you that wow perspective. So it's sometimes color, you can increase the saturation, but I don't think that's what you need here. I think you need to give more oomph to your subject, weight-wise in the frame. And I think if you try those different things, perspective, uh, moving in closer, that will do it. So nice job, and thank you for submitting this portrait of Chase and scratches behind the ears to him. And if you live in Montana, you're very lucky. I love visiting Montana, and I love those wide open spaces. So nice job on this, Paula. Let me start by saying big thumbs up, Marjorie, for seeing this and then for taking the time to stop and capture this moment here. What makes this portrait, this photo, special for me is the fact that you captured 3 sheep peering out of this door. This would still be a really nice photo with 1 sheep, but the fact that there are 3, that's what makes the portrait even more special. It's very endearing moment. I mean, I see these 3 little faces and I just smile. And they're all different shapes and sizes. So you have this sheep here in the middle. It's taller. It's got a white face and a lighter coat, and I like how you can see its legs. It's almost like it's got, white socks on. And then you have this darker color sheep. He's got the darker face and even darker fur, and he's kind of peering around. And then here you've got an even smaller sheep, and looks like maybe he looks older to me, and maybe a senior sheep, or maybe I'm just imagining it. But that's what all of these faces, they're different. They each have their own little personality, and they all obviously, maybe they're looking at you, they see you, they heard you, but their curiosity is piqued, and you capture just a lot of charm. And then you have, of course, this great setting, this old barn, and old barns are just fantastic things to photograph. You've got fantastic color with the red paint that's peeling. You've got a little bit of yellow here, and you can see the gray boards, maybe where the paint has chipped off, and then you see how the boards are eroding away at the bottom. You've got these open spaces. It's just, this is again a really nice storytelling portrait. It's where these sheep live. It's a lot of texture and visual interest. Just really, really nice job on this. And I like how you offset the sheep to the right, and they're framed naturally within the door frame. So you've got really nice framing going on, creative framing. And I also like how you can see that the door is open and you can see the cross, the diagonal crossboard in the board. So just, a lot of interesting elements going on, and I just keep lingering. I keep seeing more. So nice job on this. The only thing I want to caution you on is this photo the sheep look soft. They don't look like they're in sharp focus. I don't know what the circumstances are. You maybe had to fire the shot off real quick, or maybe you took it while you were in the car, or you couldn't get close enough, or whatever reason. But do your best to try to get a sharp focus. Make sure you have a fast enough shutter speed, and make sure you're steady. Your hands are steady when you hold the camera, because this is a really a gem of a portrait, and things like this don't come before your eyes very often. So do your best to nail that focus. Your exposure looks good. You could even punch up this portrait a little bit to bring out maybe the red in the wood planks if you wanted, or maybe it was just faded as it is. But that's all part of your vision for the portrait. But again, thumbs up for seeing this and capturing it in a very, very creative way. And just stay on top of your focal point and your shutter speed and getting a sharp focus. But thanks so much for contributing this photo for critique. It brought a big smile to my face. Okay, this photo was submitted by Mike. I doesn't have a last name, so Mike says this was an attempt to create an image that could be reproduced for a magazine ad. I left space for text placement. You know, there's just something very timeless about black and white images. They're classic. They're classic imagery. So the fact that you rendered this in black and white to try to sell champagne, I think, is very appropriate. You know, I really like that. I also like how you incorporate a fire in the background. That again kind of creates a wonderful mood for this project, this ad project. And I like you've got some moody shadows working on the floor. I do like the shadow of the table on the floor. It's almost like a spotlight in reverse. And but I think what I would do is maybe rethink your lighting. So I think this shadow under the table is nice and it enhances the portrait. But then you've also got some shadows on the floor here on the left. I don't see them on the right. So that does tend to pull the focus, you know, a little bit off, leave the picture a little bit unbalanced. So you've got everything centered. So I would maybe rethink the lighting and get rid of this portion of the shadow right here. You could do that also in post in Photoshop. You could clean that up, but I would try to actually remove that, so you don't want anything to really pull the focus away from this fine bottle of champagne. The other thing that you could do is next time maybe move the table and the champagne further away from the fireplace, from the background. So that will give a nice separation. That will also help isolate the bottle of champagne and the glass in the frame. I don't see any camera settings, so I don't know what aperture you were using, but I would probably shoot this with a wide aperture. And again, move that table further away from the fireplace to give a nice separation and to help create a more shallow depth of field. And envision that fireplace more out of focus and as even a softer, more wider blur, and that would again make that bottle of champagne and glass center stage. So you've got everything centered. Your composition is centered, which works. So just keep that in mind also when you're doing the lighting. So again, let's clean this. I would clean this lighting up. This shadow here up on the left. And the other thing I would question is this glass piece of artwork here. If the company wanted that, first of all, if the company didn't want that, I would probably not include it in this image. I think it tends to pull the focus away from the champagne bottle and the glass. It's covering the stem of the glass, and it's even covering part of the champagne bottle. So for me, I don't think that it's enhancing this portrait. I think this bottle of champagne and this glass can carry this ad and this portrait on its own. So if it was not requested by the ad agency or company, I would remove it. If it is maybe something that they're selling or they did want to include, I would rethink the placement of it. Maybe put it behind so it's not covering the bottle and it's not covering the glass, and or get a larger table so you can really set it off to the side. So rethink the role that this plays, and if it's really not playing in a role in this bottle, trying to sell this bottle of champagne, then I would probably remove it. And nice job. I do like the black background. So, and again, that was a smart move to include a lot of space for text in ad copy. And since you did make it all black and solid, you can even, if needed, they could even add more space to the side. So that's another advantage about using an all black background. It makes it easier to expand that. So, these can be very difficult shots. So nice job having, a vision for something and then setting up the lighting and executing it, because that can be very challenging and difficult. So I think you're off to a really good start. So maybe again, pull that table further away. Try to isolate that champagne bottle and glass so it stands out more in the frame, so it maintains the focus. Rethink this piece of glass, and then refine the angle of your lighting so you don't have this dark area here, trying to pull the focus away. So I do like this, again, this almost reverse spotlight, as I like to call it. So envision this table further out in the middle, and then that little shadow underneath the table, and the legs kind of guide the viewer's eyes right up to the champagne bottle and glass. So I bet this was a fun shoot for you, and it's always good to try to be creative and when you're doing shots for advertisements. So it's a very good exercise, and thank you for submitting this, Mike. Nice job. Okay, this photo was taken by Robert Engel, and Robert states that this image was taken at the Port Angeles, Washington boatyard. The orbit was scheduled for demolition within the next week. The image was captured with the Canon 5D Mark III using the 16 to 35 millimeter lens. Aperture setting was f/22, shutter speed 1/50th of a second, ISO 100. One thing, though, would be nice to see is it would be nice to see some more detail here in the bottom part of the boat. I have a feeling that that's just some, again, some great texture and corrosion and just some would add another interesting element and layer to this boat. So I would go in and try to open that up in post-processing and bring out maybe some of that detail and what's there, because especially when you get down to the bottom, you're not seeing much. I think if you can go in and do that, that would actually enhance this portrait and add, again, another layer, because you've got wonderful lines going and layers with the different layers of this boat again, and just keep that going down to the bottom. You know, I keep looking, like I'm looking under the boat, I want to see what's down there, and I see this little line here, so it makes me wonder, was that like another little door, a trap door or something? But I would take the time, see if you can bring out some of the detail down here at the bottom. I think that would actually enhance this image. And I think also if you, now this almost looks not quite like a square crop, but if you had opened up your comp a little more so the composition isn't so cramped, it's just a little bit cramped, you know, where you're kind of right at the edge. I just feel like this amazing boat and this magnificent sky, that the image needs to breathe a little more, it needs to be opened up a little more. So I probably would not have composed or cropped so tight. So I don't know if you did that in camera or if you did it after the fact. If you did it after the fact, I would maybe go in and rethink and not crop so tight. Or maybe you cropped because you had some distracting elements here, and the only way to get rid of them was to crop them out. If there's a way you can maybe clone over those distracting elements, and if it wasn't too difficult, I might do that. But again, nice job. I think you did a wonderful job capturing the character and the textures and the story of this boat. And the story meaning that it makes me as a viewer want to know more. From this portrait, I want to know more about what's going on. I want to know also what these things are at the top, if there's a way you can maybe open those up too. But again, this little number, for me, this little number is almost like a name tag on the boat. So it really personalizes this, the portrait. I call this actually a portrait of this boat. So again, really, really nice job, Robert. And thank you again for submitting it. And I really enjoyed critiquing it. Okay, and this last photo was taken by Judith Everhart, and it's titled Murphy. And she says, "My adorable dog Murphy loved to chase the stick in the ocean and surf back to the shore. Didn't matter how far out the stick was thrown, he went for it with gusto. Sometimes his athleticism would even draw onlookers. This is my favorite memory of him." I have to say, Judith, that this portrait just really makes me smile. I think, the energy and emotion that you captured in his face is just amazing. I can even see in his eyes, he's even having a wild time and smiling with his eyes. Murphy is in his element, and the fact that you got him surfing, captured him surfing with a stick in his mouth, is just fantastic. This is just a great portrait, and lots of wonderful elements working here. Where do I start? First of all, the the way you've got his body just breaking at the right time, and you can see his one paw here. You can see his tail on top. You can see how his back legs are stretched out, and then you've got this little formation of the water that's formed around him, and actually in a very creative way is framing him. And then you've got the break, I guess called the break and the wave right there as he's riding the wave. And then that stick that he's holding in his mouth. I mean, he is just working and riding that wave just like a surfer, and he is a dog surfer. And I can also a little bit kind of make out the shadow of, it looks like this might be a little bit of his shadow here in the water. But oh, you know, this really is what makes a portrait memorable. It's you capture just this most fantastic snippet moment in Murphy's life. And the fact that you say that this is your favorite memory of him speaks volumes, because that's what makes a portrait um, special. It's that it captures, it sparks joy, it makes you smile, it makes you cry, it makes you remember just this. You will always remember this moment and this time in Murphy's life that he's out there surfing. And I can imagine that there would be a lot of onlookers just watching in amazement. If I was there, I would be one of them. So thank you again for seizing the moment and capturing it too. I know this wasn't probably an easy shot to get, but you nailed it. I don't see any camera settings, but I am assuming you had a telephoto lens. But it looks like you got his face. His face is in focus, and again his eyes, even his eyes, I can really see his eyes, even a little catchlight here. And I love how you can see his paw here and how his body is riding the wave. One thing I might do is I might maybe just crop it a little bit. For me, you know, the interesting part of this portrait is obviously right here. You've almost got like 3 layers working. You've got this layer of water right above the wave or the break, and then right here in the center, and then right here at the bottom. So for me, I think obviously the center part and at the bottom is important, because I like a little bit of the shadow you see it, and this is where Murphy's heading. I might just crop a little bit off the top, and by doing that, that will give Murphy a little more visual weight in the frame. He'll take up more weight in the frame. So, you know, let me show you what I'm thinking about. And again, this can be, cropping can be a very personal, oh, sorry, wrong one. Cropping can be a very, oh, hold on, sorry. Cropping can be a very personal, you know, artistic, but I like seeing a little bit of the break in the water, but maybe not so much. Let's just see. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but there. I think that kind of works. It's easier. My eyes stay a little bit more focused on him. It's easier to keep the eyes on him. Let's go back and look. I don't know that we need all that. A little bit to me, a little bit too much space. He's almost competing a little bit with that space. Let's go back forward, tighten it up a little. I think that works, because I think it's important that you show the break, because that shows that he's actually surfing, but you don't need to show a lot above it. So that keeps everything, you know, all the focus and the energy right here. But again, that's up to you. But big thumbs up. He must just bring so much joy to you, and it must be so much fun to go to the beach with him. So thank you again for submitting and sharing and capturing this wonderful moment of Murphy surfing. Really great job on this.